All right, so here we go, and welcome to March monthly mindfulness. For those of you who've been coming for quite a while, I've changed the title to monthly mindfulness. So this still happens every month on the second Wednesday. And I try to come up with a slightly different theme. I know a lot of the stuff that I do is somewhat recycled if you've been a long time listener, but I got some relatively new stuff that I've actually um, pulled up and added to from months ago on resilience and equanimity. So that's what we're going to focus on today. My contact info is there. And I also added onto, some of you might know Vivian Burgle, one of my colleagues, works with me in employee and family resources. Gail Cole is our supervisor of employee well-being. And Carly Smolik and Kristen Turnbull are health coaches under Thrive. And they're going to be I'll share some slides on this towards the end, but this is relatively new. They're going to be, they will be providing health coaching to all employees. So that's coming up. So I'll tell you more about that when I get to that. All right. So as I said, focusing a bit on resilience. This is from the APA. I think that is American Psychological Association. The process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, and significant sources of stress. Does that sound familiar? Such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. But as we know, there's so much going on in the world that we have lots of feelings about. So I kind of thought I would focus on resilience as a way to kind of help us develop more resilience. I think many of us are already very resilient considering what we've already been through. And just being in healthcare, I think that's you're automatically resilient just having to be in the field that we're in the various roles that we do. But I like this last point. Being resilient does not mean that a person doesn't experience difficulty or distress. So, of course, we're all going through, as I mentioned, so many different things these days in our personal lives and globally and politically and climate change and all that stuff. So there's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be things that trigger us and cause reactivity. So that's why I wanted to focus on this a bit. Now, this particular graphic I really like. This is from Dr. Dan Siegel, called the Healthy Mind Platter. And it's like the healthy diet platter, the healthy food platter. You know, you need all those different ingredients, right? So some are very self-explanatory: sleep time, physical time. Obviously, we need to get good, all good balances of those in our, and this is all for brain fitness, by the way. It's not just overall wellness, but it's particularly for our brain fitness. Focus time is, being able to focus in on things, having control of our attention so that we're not constantly distracted, which, of course, we have so much information overload these days. But focusing on a project, focusing on something you really like, maybe it's something that you're kind of getting in the flow of, a hobby or some activity that you're doing. So there's lots of different things that might fall in this category. Connecting time, obviously, this has come across in so much research how important our relationships are, not just the quantity, but the quality of our relationships, and not just the ones that we're close to, but all relationships. You know, think about the many different social networks that we have. So, and then there's playtime. Thinking about that, do we get enough playtime? Just really having pure fun and joy. Downtime, total vegging, relaxing, doing nothing. And that's hard for many of us to just do nothing. That's why some of our meditation practices are helpful, because it's sort of like doing nothing on purpose, although I think there's a lot going on upstairs that we're trying to train. And that's the time in. Time in is all about meditation, mindfulness, prayer, contemplation. There's lots of different ways that you can be in touch with that. So, of course, we're going to focus mostly on the time in today's, but I just kind of wanted to present that as a way to think about it. And you might think about, well, what's an area that you might like to improve or cultivate a little bit? Maybe just pick one and focus in on that for the next couple of weeks. And see if you can use some of the
responded,
mindful
the
tools
live
to
links
do that as
for
well. And that
groups.
might be one way to do that. As I put this up, 7 habits
I mean,
of
on
highly
14,
resilient people.
we're getting daily updates from
Getting,
on 14
I'm going to mute
telling us
everybody.
that it's still not up and they're
So
working on it.
just muted everybody. So you feel free to use the chat if you have a question or you want to make a comment along the way. And also you can unmute yourself if you want to speak up. I think we're small enough where you can do that. So either way, so these are, again, just an overall 7 habits. I'm sorry, I can't remember the source where I got this from, but the first one, again, we'll be focusing on mind calming and restorative activities. And then the fourth one, avoiding extreme responses, replacing negative thoughts with realistic ones. That's the other part that we'll kind of focus on. That sort of bleeds into learning to view the future with optimism and hope. Although won't get too much into that, but the idea of trying to overcome all the negativity and the natural bias that we have. I think that's the next slide. Let's see. No, it's not, but coming up, the negativity bias, and I'll show you that. But in our world today, we're really swimming against the tide or swimming upstream or whatever metaphor you want to use because of VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think we can all relate to this. I mean, even just the example of the cybersecurity issues that we've been dealing with and how disruptive that is. And so that contains a couple of these characteristics. But as I mentioned before, all the rest of what's going on in our lives create all this really roller coaster effect of our attention, our ability to focus, our emotions, our thought processes. And this quote, if you've been feeling overwhelmed or unfocused, if you've struggled with staying on task or been blindsided by emotion during this time, me too. But this is precisely what our prior research regarding the human brain's attention system would predict. And that's by Amishi Jha, who's the author of Peak Mind, which is a great book, by the way. She studies high stress occupations like police, fire, first responders, healthcare, and military. And the book is really all about the techniques that they found to be most effective in helping people focus, particularly under high stress conditions. And they are mindfulness practices, a lot of the things that we've been talking about already. And so you're here, so I appreciate that I think you already appreciate. But this is kind of the way that we can stabilize ourselves. And today we'll do a practice to counteract all of these things that are going on in our world. So I think we're all feeling overwhelmed. We've been through the pandemic, and things are kind of crazy right now in many different ways. So VUCA is at its peak, and but there are some things that we can do to kind of not let it get out of control. And so a couple of very quick techniques. This is the stop technique, sometimes called the 1-minute breathing space. And you can do this with me as I'm talking. The S is to stop and take stock. So really just asking yourself, how am I doing right now? Or what's going on for me right now? Just asking yourself that question, noticing what the answer is, being aware. And then take a deep mindful breath or 2 or 3. But I think deepening the breath always helps. Feeling the breath itself, feeling the in-breath, feeling the out-breath, knowing that the breath can be our anchor. And then open up and observe. What thoughts do you notice? What's going on with your feelings? And what's going on in the body? What sensations? Not to judge it, not to criticize it, not to think we have to fix it, but just to observe what is happening, even if there are distressing thoughts or emotions, even if there are things in the body that are, sometimes we feel tension in the shoulders or the jaw, or it affects our digestion and stomach. all that, right? We can fix that later. This exercise is all about just noticing, bringing it into awareness, trying to do that with some non-judgmental attitude. Not saying, oh, this is terrible, this is bad, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Just noticing it. And if you notice those judgments, that's okay. I mean, we all have them, but just noticing them and not getting caught up in those either. And then the P finally is to proceed with new possibilities, continue without expectation. Just hopefully this quick little change gives you a different perspective and a different way to a different kind of awareness. It can enable us to step back a little bit from all that stuff that might be triggering us and causing that reactivity. Another practice that you can try is the hand. I've done this before, but you just hold your hand up, and with your other hand, you just trace the outline of your fingers. And as you move up, you breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, and you can go at whatever pace is good for you. Now breathing in. Usually it means a little deeper breathing, and it also provides us with a little bit of that tactile sense as we trace the fingers and the thumb, and then you can go all the way back if you have some time. But again, that's quick 30-second kind of practice to ground us, regulate the breathing, feel that, the hands are really quite amazing when you think about it, all that they do for us, but also just all the sensations that we're aware of in the hands. So another quick practice, just to give you a couple of quick ones to keep in mind. The other thing we're fighting is our natural tendency to focus on negative things. And so when there's a lot of negative things going on, it just sort of amplifies it. But we do have a tendency to put more weight on negative events. And we do react to and make decisions more strongly to negative events and stimuli compared to positive ones. Even if you're more optimistic, we still have this negativity bias hardwired into the brain. And it's because of the way that our whole body, but in particular, the inner core of our brain has evolved. And that really comes down to the fight or flight response. We still have that very strongly. We needed that to survive, right? And it's still very active. So we're not fighting saber-toothed tigers these days, fortunately, but we're fighting lots of other, I think, maybe smaller triggers, but many more of them throughout a typical day. And so if that just happens and gets out of control, it's pretty easy to get into a very negative spiral of thoughts, feelings, and that is going to affect our mind and our body. So again, we can counteract that as well as the VUCA that I talked about, but it really takes intention, because otherwise, as Mark Twain said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. So, but it's easy to think about the what ifs and to project into the future and in a way kind of catastrophize what might happen in our world, in our families, in our workplace, whatever it might be. And again, it's easy for that to spiral out of control a bit. But as you know, there are ways to, through our mindfulness practice. So this graphic just shows that there's a stimulus, and if we don't do anything about it to create a space between the stimulus and the response, we tend to react in ways that are conditioned according to our conditioned patterns of thinking and beliefs and emotional triggers that, again, are conditioned throughout our lives. And what mindfulness helps us do is sort of in the middle, it helps us find that space. Even the quick techniques that I showed you before helps us give a little bit of a glimpse of that space so that we don't have to react automatically, but we can learn to take a moment to respond. And mindfulness meditation helps us find that space between stimulus and response. So the two exercises we did before are examples of anchoring or grounding, but another good one, and we're going to practice, I'm going to put this all together into one meditation, okay? So that's coming, but anchoring, grounding, I've talked about this before, but I keep coming back to it because I think it's such an easy, simple technique that you can do. And all it really means is you can even imagine yourself like a tree and you're rooted in the ground, and that's the grounding, right? That's being anchored, the deep roots, and feeling your feet on the ground. Even imagine roots growing out of the bottom of your feet, but just feel that sense of touch and connection on the bottom of your feet. Or if you're sitting in a chair, your sit bones and your buttocks and your lower torso being supported by the chair, another grounding point. Or your hands and arms as they rest, being grounded. Or even if you're just standing, maybe you're, in line at a grocery store and you're in one of those lines that's going too slow, and you're getting a little bit irritated by it. Just bring your attention into the body, feel the position of the posture of your body, the feeling of your feet on the ground. Take a few deep breaths. That's a great way to just anchor into the present moment and realize that you don't automatically have to react to that slow line that you're in. Same thing with traffic. I mean, there's so many examples in traffic these days. It's actually good practice ground to do some of these kinds of grounding techniques. And of course, just breathing. Of course, I've talked a lot about this, but the point here is that you don't necessarily have to sit and meditate for 10 minutes or so. You can just do some simple breathing exercises, and that's going to help us ground and anchor ourselves and stabilize our attention and relax a little bit. So a couple of examples are just paying attention to the inflow and the outflow of your breathing. Sometimes we say know when you're breathing in, know when you're breathing out. Just that simple awareness of the in-breath and the out-breath. Or you might use words such as calm on the in-breath, ease on the out-breath. It could be anything that you like saying to yourself, so that you try to keep your attention stabilized. And when we're doing that, of course, our mind is going to pull us away and hijack our attention. And we know from our practice that all we need to do is be aware of that, let it go, and then bring our attention gently but directly back to our next breath. And one way to do that is to feel the sensations of the breath, or to use that mental noting, so that we bring ourselves continually back. And it's like it is literally like an anchor in a boat. You could be in choppy waters, but this is a way of throwing the anchor out so that you kind of stabilize things and are able to be a little bit more in control. Now, one breathing that's particularly effective is cyclic sighing. They actually compared this to several different types of breathing. Another breathing that was very effective is box breathing, which the Navy SEALs use. Box breathing is simply breathing into, say, 4. You can use whatever number is comfortable for you, but breathe into 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and then repeat. That's box breathing. And you need to do this for a few cycles, probably at least 5, I would say, and more is better. Cyclic sighing is a little different. I find this to be very effective for myself, but you need to pick what works for you. Even just simple deep breathing is helpful. But cyclic sighing is a 2-part in-breath. So you breathe in halfway and you feel the breath down into the belly, and then you breathe in fully to fill the lungs. That's the second part. And then you breathe out with an open mouth, sigh. So halfway in, you might try this with me. Halfway in, filling the belly. You might even put your hands over the belly. All the way in, filling the lungs. And then open mouth, sigh it out. Let all that tension go. And do that a couple more times. Halfway in, all the way in, and then sigh it out. And that is very effective. And they found that to be very good. Just it can actually help in a lot of instances where you feel an emotional trigger or any of these things I've been talking about. And these are a couple of links. By the way, I'm going to, I have a lot of your emails on the original invite that I sent out. But if you signed up on LMS, maybe put into the chat or let me know, and I'll make sure that I'll send out the slides and the recording. But I do also post them on Thrive, and I'll show you that at the end where that is. Because there are some links here you might want to check into. These just cite other studies and articles that show how effective breathing can really be. So you might want to check those out too, particularly if you like to look at the research and look at the evidence for some of this. So at this point, we're going to turn our attention to equanimity. And what we're really doing with all of this, as we talk about resilience, is we're strengthening our capacity for equanimity. So there's the definition. And there are some synonyms for that. But as we do this, all of these practices, I feel, really help us strengthen this ability to be calm, to be composed, even in the face of high stress kinds of things. And of course, our meditation practices help us do that quite a bit. But I'm going to go through some information that I got from a meditation instructor. Her name is Sebene Selassie, and she's off of the 10% Happier app, which is now, I think, just called Happier. But anyway, she talks about in resilience, we need to have a capacity for resolve or determination, right? That's kind of a key aspect of resilience. And that helps us guide our practice, guide what to do in the moment, gives us some wisdom, even though there's distractions and we get discouraged and even distraught about what's going on. But that's the resilience part of it, right? Is being able to counteract that. And we can cultivate this resolve that allows us to recognize what's happening in the moment. And I think that's the key skill in our mindfulness practice, is to be aware. So yeah, you still might get triggered. You might get angry or annoyed or whatever that emotional reaction is. But instead of letting it carry you off, you are aware of it so that you can find that space between stimulus and response. And what she talks about as equanimity, the capacity to allow whatever is happening. And that's built into mindfulness and meditation practices, kind of even saying to yourself, allow this to be as it is, okay? Not saying that you're not going to take any action, because you might want to take action, might want to get involved, you might want to take some thoughtful action about whatever it is that's upsetting you. And she quotes Martin Luther King Jr., "Peace is not the destination, peace is the way." And so she turns that into equanimity is not the destination, but equanimity is the way. Equanimity is seeing what's happening without getting caught up with what we see. And there's no need to get lost in whatever is going on or upset that we've lost our way. Equanimity includes starting over again and again in this moment, and then this one, and then this one, and this one, because there's a lot going on. We're going to be triggered all the time. And then she finishes, and this is, I think, helpful. It's helpful to remember that resilience is a natural ability, that anyone can develop it, and cultivating a positive attitude. So that's one key. Resolve, another one, and equanimity are three ways to grow our resilience. So we try to bring these qualities into our daily life. So that's just a graphic to kind of talk about that a little bit. And what I'd like to do is check the time. I always try to finish this by 1:15, just so hopefully you don't need to leave at 1. But if you do, I certainly understand if you have a meeting. But we're going to do the meditation now, and it will be around developing equanimity and resilience. This is being taped, so if you want to go back to it, you'll have that. All right, so let's do this. If you're new to this, all you have to do is follow along, and I'll guide you through the instructions, but it's really easy. There's no really right or wrong. So the first step is just to find a position that's comfortable and relaxed. So taking a moment to adjust your body in whatever position you're in so that you are relaxed and comfortable, so that you can also be attentive and alert. And you can close your eyes, or you can use sort of a soft downward gaze, whichever is more comfortable for you. And just allowing ourselves to settle into the body, feeling that those touch points, perhaps those anchor points of feet on the floor, pressure of our lower body in the chair, our arms and hands resting. And also feeling the breath, and maybe taking some time with any one of those breathing techniques. It could just be simple deep breathing, but taking somewhat of a deeper inhale and then a longer, slower exhale. We're doing the cyclic sign. If you like, 2-part in-breath. And then let it all out with an open mouth sigh. All the air out. Do that a couple more times at your own pace, whatever you find to be helpful in your breathing. And realize that, your attention is going to wander. That's what our minds do. They do that all the time, right? Especially these days. That's the point. So when you notice your attention has wandered, and when you notice you're lost in thought, that's okay. Don't give yourself a hard time. Just simply be aware of that. Let that distraction go and gently bring your attention back to the breathing or to the anchor of the body. So this is our anchor, either the breath or the body or both, a place where we can always return to stabilize our attention, to get out of the head, back into the body if needed. It's always there for us. Now imagine a time when you felt even-minded and balanced. See if you can bring up something. Maybe it was something recent. Maybe it was like a time you were about to yell or lose your temper or react to something, but instead you took a pause. Instead, you just didn't react. You just took a deep breath. It could be anything. See if you can bring that to mind. And notice if you can see, sense, or feel what it was like. Where were you? What did you see? What did you hear? Most importantly, what did you feel inside yourself? Now, if nothing comes to mind, you can imagine a mountain. A mountain is solid, strong, and powerful. So can you recall a time when you felt the strength of a mountain, or imagine what that's like? And what does that feel like? A mountain is very stable and very steady. And even though there's lots of weather and lots of the change of seasons and all sorts of things is going on, the mountain remains essentially itself. So you can use that as an image. And you might say things were as they were during that time. I could be with this as it was. You could say that to yourself. I can be with things as they were. You might repeat those words in your mind. I can be with things as they were. I handle this with strength with equanimity. And notice what happens inside you as you remember that time or as you imagine the mountain. And continue to breathe and notice what's happening inside you. Now, imagine something that's made finding equanimity difficult. Could be something simple. Maybe you were in traffic and you were cut off, or maybe you were overwhelmed at work, or maybe something happened with your kids or your spouse or partner or whatever it is. Just maybe imagine something, bring something to mind. It doesn't have to be anything, really intense. Just something that's kind of moderate or mild, that where you found being even-minded or equanimity difficult. Now, as you remember this situation, notice what happens in the body. Maybe there's some tightness or tension, contraction or constriction, or even aversion. Maybe you want to get away from that feeling. Maybe you don't like it. You wish it were different. So just breathe and notice and just allow. And let's use words that might be helpful. You can imagine sending these phrases to yourself in this situation, or sending them out to the situation. Things are as they are. I can be with things as they are. Maybe repeat those. If you like, things are as they are, and I can be with things as they are. Just see what's happening now. Involving a person, you might say, you are as you are. I can be with you as you are. I am as I am. May I accept myself just as I am. May I weather this situation with grace, with equanimity. Now, as you say these words, see if you can remember how it felt in the earlier part of the meditation and import that feeling here. How it felt that time when you were balanced and had that equanimity. Things are as they are. I can be with things as they are. I may not like these things, and that's okay. They may not be what I want, but I can be with them. I have the capacity to be with life as it is. Now, you may have your own words. So what words do you want to say to yourself related to your situation? Kind of giving yourself a little self-compassion and care. And you might say them to yourself now. And let's go back to that earlier memory, that imagination of the solidity and strength and capacity that we all have within us to handle what life brings. And sit here with that feeling for a few more breaths. Say to yourself, whatever I have to deal with that's coming up that I don't know about, may I meet it with equanimity. And as you move into the rest of your day, see if you can find moments where you feel that sense of uncertainty or some of those emotions that may be strong that come up, and see if you can bring some of these thoughts and these messages back to yourself. Finding that space, grounding yourself, using your breath, more using the image of the mountain, whatever you find helpful. Let's see if you can practice that after we close the meditation. And so with that, we will close the meditation. So maybe take another deep breath. Let it out, open the eyes, stretch a little bit, whatever is helpful. And we'll finish that for today. And love to hear what you thought about that. If you want to put a word or two in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, that's fine too, whichever you might prefer. But so with that, I'm going to move on and just finish up the slides. So relaxing, good, quite refreshing, very good, thank you. Yep. Others feel free to put in if you'd like, don't have to. Helpful path back to equanimity today. Yep, a lot going on. Opportunity to reflect. Almost drifted to sleep at the end. Okay. I really like the affirmations. Wonderful phrases. Good. Helpful. Great. So let's see. Next we have just, it's hard to sit and do nothing. It's hard to do a classic meditation. As you know, there's lots of different ways to meditate, whether it's an informal practice, just doing a normal everyday task and paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it, or having a mindful cup of tea or coffee, or really paying attention to the food that you're eating. But these are other ways to kind of do that, that you can still be mindful and not necessarily be sitting, closing your eyes and meditating. So you might want to integrate just mindful awareness into any of these activities. And that'll help just strengthen the overall way to equanimity and resilience. So again, just to remind you, we're still doing the phone meditations. These are available live 5 days a week. There's an access line and code. And again, I'll put these in the slides, and these will be available to you later, but maybe you know about these, but maybe you can join. Or there is also a phone number you can call, which has 3 pre-recorded meditations. And then this link takes you to our Carillon Wellbeing site, which is our EFR site. And we have about 30 different meditations on there. More workshops. You obviously know about the monthly mindfulness. That's this one every month. And then starting on March 18th, doing something called Relax, Focus, De-Stress, and Connect. Done this before, but it's a 4-week course. So each week we take one of those and focus on that. So you can join for the ones you want, or you can join all 4, whatever is best for you. Register on LMS for any of those. And the app, I know some of you have the app. If you don't, you might check it out. It's free through that same Carillon Wellbeing site. You get on the homepage, you scroll down, you'll see it. I think it says eMindful actually. And you click on that, that takes you to the registration page, and then you can download it. But they do have some pretty good workshops coming up. They're all very brief. They're like 10, 15-minute exercises. They've got some things coming up on stress and anxiety and for Mental Health Month in May. They've got something on avoiding burnout, slowing down. There's some pretty good offerings coming up, and they're in very easy bite-sized kinds of pieces. And again, there's that link to where we have the guided meditations, also apps. I've been using this one a lot lately, Healthy Minds. This is a free app, and it's actually done by a leading researcher, Richie Davidson, in mindfulness, and he does a lot of really, pure, real research. But the app is excellent. It has all different kinds of brief lessons and then meditations, so you might check that out. And then I have all the stuff I post on YouTube, so that's a link to that. And just a reminder about the program. EFR provides a lot of good services for you and your family. And also wanted to tell you, Thrive is where you can find all of our well-being services. So, on the intranet, you go to departments and communities, and then T, and you'll see Thrive there, and it'll open up to this honeycomb thing. EFR related stuff is under my well-being, but there's also different aspects of that that you can click into and check that out. And with that, I wanted to tell you about that health coaching that's coming up. So the 2 health coaches, I think that's slated to start later in the spring. Keep your eyes open for that. I'm sure there'll be some notices about when it becomes available, but it's going to be free, confidential, one-to-one health coaching for any of these kinds of issues that you see here. And you don't have to be on the medical plan. It could be for any employee that gets paid under YNHHS. All right. So, and then just to finish up, say thank you very much and namaste to you and peace be with you. And any last questions? I'll stop the recording in a minute. See, I see there's a couple more comments in there. Oh yeah, good. So yes, Cortland Dahl is he's got a great voice. He does the thing on healthy minds. Yeah, I know it is hard to find on that. So, all right. Thank you all very much. Let me stop the share and I'll stop the recording. And if you have any questions, I'll be around for a couple minutes. So thank you all.